Yes, is this it? Yes. Okay, everyone, welcome. I'm going to say good afternoon, because we're here in Iceland and it's afternoon. Also going to say good evening, because we have some people tuning in from Europe, looking at you. And I'm also going to say good morning, because we also have some people tuning in from the West Coast. That's the West, right? Yes, Pacific. So thank you everyone so much for joining us today on this AVO event co-hosted by Innovation Week, or triggered by Innovation Week. Super glad about that initiative, very excited about this Innovation Week. This is the second Innovation Week that they host, the team. And they asked us to, or invited us to join, just work, yes. And we thought, what better to do than to talk about data success stories and then play some foosball. Play some foosball. I'm sorry, you who are online won't be able to join us for foos. If you want, we can start a Zoom link and then you can join us for the fun. But next time, just fly out to Iceland and then you'll join us for foos. So, super glad to be here today, and thank you to the entire AVO team for making this happen. You can find them all around here wearing an AVO t-shirt like this. Cheers. Yes, this is actually a good prompt. Cheers, everyone. Happy Innovation Week. Good to see you all. Really happy to see you all. I just wanted to kick this off by quickly reviewing some housekeeping items, how to get the most out of today's session, and then quickly reviewing the agenda. So we want to make this interactive, and this applies to both online and here. We want you to share your thoughts, because that just adds more depth to everything. So if you disagree with what we're saying, shout it out. If you have any other angles on it, we would love to hear it. We want to learn from everyone here as well. Ask questions, because that is more value for everyone. If you are thinking about it, then probably someone else is. So please don't hesitate and never think that your question is stupid, ever. If there's one thing I learned from my mathematical studies in the university, it was that I was always afraid to ask questions because it would make me look stupid. But the teachers are there to answer those questions for you. And then just tell us about any audio or video issues that you have. We have people monitoring both our community Slack and I think the YouTube live chat. So please reach out if you have any issues with that. How to join the discussion. If you are remote, I encourage you to join our Slack community. You can go to therighttrack.avo.app and head to the channel Meetup Discussions and then go nuts in there. If you are on site, like everyone here, I'm looking at you all. Hey, come on, Jay. Just go ahead and raise your hands during the talk. If the speakers don't want to get your question, they will either start the talk by telling that, or just tell you to put them down or something. But we'll also end each talk with a quick, couple of minutes session, and then at the end we'll have all of the speakers here on stage for some discussions. But also, I encourage you also to join our community Slack and see what the online people are talking about, because we want to connect the world. So this is how you keep the conversation going overall after this event as well. Join our community Slack, follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and mention us for some juicy discussions. And now quickly reviewing today's agenda. Very excited for today's speakers. It's quite diverse in sort of subject areas. The theme from our perspective is data success stories. We are going to start with Kjartan Þórisson. Yeah, Kjartan, who is the founder and current head of product at Noona. And he is going to talk about balancing intuition with analytics, which is really important. And how to measure magic is his talk. Then, some suspension during the sip of water. We are going to hear from Kristen from Grid. Shout out Kristen. Grid is a friend company because Their founder is an investor in Avo and has been for a really long time. And when Kristen joined, they also became an Avo customer. So we care deeply about grid. Very fun. So Kristen is going to talk about shortening time to insights through user behavior scoring. And sort of how we like to think about this. This is very top of mind for Avo as well, us internally. It's all about discovering those aha moments for customers. And that is always such an important balance of intuition, user research, and then quantitative data. And Kristen is going to shed a light on how they do that with quantitative data at Grid. So I'm really excited about that one. And then we're going to hear from Kristbjörn, pleasure. We used to work together at QuizUp. I think he was our second team member in the data team at Avo, or third. And he has been doing product analytics for a long time, but he's also been in all sorts of sort of business areas previously and finance. So he brought a strong business perspective into the product analytics team. And he's going to be talking about the event graph, sort of how he thinks about mapping events when, well, I think in general data structures, and then how to think about them when you have a graph database, right? Yeah, which is top of mind for Kristen, according to our latest data and dranks, which is a regular meetup, as QuizUp people do. Sotheby's is also an Avo customer. They were one of our first customers, but mostly for sort of professional services. And then they went through a major reorg and all sorts of stuff. And they just became a customer again, which is fun. And then I'm going to wrap things up with a quick sort of backstory about how we ended up building Avo and how we built the data culture at QuizUp and how I have consulted various companies in that. And the subtitle actually for this talk is Why Analytics and sort of highly functional and valuable analytics is actually a cross-functional team sport, which is a strong opinion loosely held from my perspective. Jaakko, good to see you, friend. Nice. Yes, so I did forget to introduce myself. I am Stefania. I am the CEO and co-founder of Avo. And Avo is the leading analytics governance platform for product analytics, for event-based analytics. We help teams implement event tracking faster and better with more reliable data, shortening both time to implementation, but also increasing the value and the quality of the data. And it gives me great pleasure to say that Avo is loved by some of the great data professionals that I respect in the industry, from Patreon, Adobe, Fender, the guitar producer, Rappi, Sixt, Condé Nast. Yeah, so that's me and that's Avo. And I think that actually wraps up this quick intro, and I'm going to just hand the ball over to Kjartan. You ready for this, Kjartan? Give it up for Kjartan, everybody! Ow!
How's it going? You good? Wonderful. Whoa. A little bit of feedback. Can everybody hear me? And now this. Nice. Almost there. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much, Team Avo, for inviting me. Really appreciate it. From everybody from Noona as well. As you can. Okay, note to self, do not touch the wooden box. As you can perhaps see from the title of this talk, I would say that balance is probably my ultimate virtue. So, but looking past on the looking back on the presentation that I have prepared, I am quite aware that I might be leaning a little bit in the direction of magic and intuition instead of analytics. But I think on a macro perspective, for the balance of the entire evening, that might be quite healthy, since I think, based on the lineup, that the other talks will be more data heavy perhaps, but time will tell. As Stefania said, my name is Kjartan. I am the founder of Noona, and from day to day I work there as the head of product. But I am also a lifelong student of magic. Not the kind that they teach you at Hogwarts, although my experience there might be a topic for another keynote at some other point in time. I will invite every one of you to there. But the real kind, the real magic that we all experience and that we hopefully experience more and more through technology and product as well. Noona, for those of you that don't know, is an all-in-one business platform, essentially, for the sellers and buyers of personal services and local services, usually. And there is a lot of static noise in this, but I'm gonna move past that. We have a marketplace that, if you know Noona, you probably know us through the marketplace, but that is essentially just the top of the tip of the iceberg, because we then also have a backend system for the service providers themselves, where we provide them with a pretty advanced CRM system with a built-in calendar and a point-of-sale system and all the goodies that essentially just help them automate their business. And this talk is about how we used our intuition, essentially, to create a small bubble of magic that we are then still trying to fully measure, understand, and hopefully scale. So let's get into it. One of the funny things about magic, in my opinion, is that you can never be a true expert in it. You can really just be a student. But we at Noona, I would say, are really passionate students, which is why our product development process is named the Magic Framework, and I will be drawing some inspiration from that in this talk. In it, you can, amongst other things, find this quote that I hope everybody here recognizes. A beautiful quote from the science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And there is, of course, a lot of truth in that, or at least there should be. But if you, like me, you might, at least from my perspective, I feel like I often try very advanced technology, extremely beautifully crafted code that is amazing on the engineering side, but sadly very devoid this one, okay. Very devoid of all magic. And that is why we at Noona, to keep us in check and to ensure that we don't get lost in the pointless pursuit of creating technology for simply technology's sake, is why we have our own version of this Arthur C. Clarke quote, which is this one. A magical user experience is the ultimate purpose of technology. Because what is technology if nobody is around to experience it, and if that experience is not magical? Almost brings us back to the age-old question of what is actually happening in a forest when a tree falls down and nobody is around to hear it, but why truly bother creating any technology or experiences that aren't magical? Which does indeed beg the question, what is a magical experience. And who are we to tell, and who am I to tell? But I would actually say that we are all valid and qualified judges for magic and for magical experiences, because we do encounter them in our everyday lives, luckily. For example, just to start with the most mundane one, the one that first popped into the mind of my fiancée when I asked her what is a magical software experience that comes to your mind. And that is this beautifully simple prompt from the iOS operating system that simply helps you enter that login text message that we all know and love. And from my personal experience, what first popped into my mind was when I was in the London tubes earlier this year, and instead of waiting or going straight to the ticketing machine or speaking to some person, I could just pick up my phone and bang, I was in the gate, and I could just directly go where I was headed. No fussiness, so seamless, so beautiful. For those of you that have, like me perhaps, test-driven a Tesla, I don't have a Tesla, that was quite a magical experience, both just driving it and then the autopilot. It's the first time that you put on a Oculus or any other kind of virtual reality headset and you're teleported into another world entirely. In the world of pure software, it's the moment when you open up your first Notion document and you write that / command, and a beautiful array of building blocks pops up that you know, back in the old days would have taken you multiple clicks inside of Word, or just not entirely possible. And it's the first time you do something that you've always done over the phone, or over a phone call, essentially at least, and you do it inside of an app, and it just works. The Uber driver comes to the right place at the right time, the food is delivered to the right place, or in our case, you show up to a service provider, to the haircut, to the beauty salon, to the chiropractor, and the service provider is just so prepared to welcome you because he has all of the necessary context and information to make your visit that more magical. And another example from the Noona universe is this this favorite splash screen animation of mine that welcomes you when you open the Noona app and lets you know that you are now in the world of Noona, and you are hopefully about to experience a tiny piece of magic. This was, in its time, and is always going to be, an irrational expense of both time and money. And even the most advanced analytical tool could never give us a return on investment number on this, but still, somehow, so worth it. Which brings me to the first rules, or first rule of magic. And there are 3 of them that I want to mention today. And that is this one, that magic truly transcends words and numbers. Just like the eternal Tao can never be named, we can never describe magic with words alone. But, in my opinion, Disney came really close when they approached it from an angle and reminded all of us to bump the lamp. Hopefully a story that many of you have heard. Perhaps a short or a quick raise of hands. Which one of you or who here has heard of the bump the lamp story? Okay, beautiful. Not that many. Okay, then I'm gonna quickly tell it. It's this. But who remembers the movie? Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Okay, quite a lot more. Wonderful. So it's a Disney animation movie published in 1988, and this particular scene that we're looking at here, this actress here, I think, or no, at least one of the actors accidentally bumped the lamp, and it started like wiggling around, and one of the directors or one of the managers obviously a person with a keen sense of magic, and Disney, of course, being known for their Disney magic, spotted that and said, like, no, we want to keep this in, and they had to redo like hundreds of animation frames, made this scene, you know, 100 times harder to create, but 1,000,000 times more magical. And we are all in, we can all be grateful for Disney for teaching us to really search and fight for the magic in our lives. So we cannot describe magic, we can only touch it, and we can only touch it by doing that little bit of extra that doesn't quite have a clear return on investment story, because magic doesn't fit in an Excel spreadsheet. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it just means that you can only measure the effect of magic, but never magic itself. And even then, it often takes a really long time to see the effect of magic, but when you do, it's nothing short of magical. Some of the companies here mentioned previously in this talk, Disney company, Apple, Tesla, of course, stock markets falling off a cliff these days, but that doesn't take anything from these truly amazing companies that have put magic at the heart of what they are doing. And a company that can sustainably create and evolve magic and magical user experiences is, in my opinion, unstoppable. And in our little corner of the universe, we see it when we open up the App Store, the Icelandic App Store at least, and we see Noona consistently being in the top 5 to 10 apps, free apps on the App Store, without any paid marketing, without any big fuss or anything like that. It's just some lucky intuition, randomness that put the right pieces in place, aligned the right incentives so that the magic was obviously felt by every participant in the Noona ecosystem. And we might not be in hockey stick territory yet, as you can see from these images, but everyone that has been through the hard work of creating a digital product, putting it out there, you guys know that something like this is pretty damn magical. But we must be vigilant, because magic today always becomes table stakes tomorrow. Magic is powerful, and it's so powerful that even one-time accidental magic can really, really get you far. But for long-term success, everyone in the company has to be a student of magic, and you have to build magic into your DNA and your company operating system. Because the history of innovation is littered with examples of magic being created and lost. In my opinion, Snapchat is an example of that. Kodak, of course, a much more famous one for those in innovation circles. And whether it's because of lack of intuition, laziness, external factors, or just the fact that they broke some of the fundamental rules of magic, I don't know, but it happens because magic today is table stakes tomorrow, and the way that your organization deals with that fact is going to have a huge say about the long-term success of that organization. Now, I am, as I told you at the beginning, extremely aware that this evening is called Data Success Stories, and I have absolutely not given that enough respect so far. But to fix that, I am going to try to risk offending the gods of magic by and giving your analytical minds a couple of equations that I encourage you to think deeply about. And it begins with this. From my point of view, success, at least in the narrow term of, or the narrow understanding of success that we are here to discuss today, which can perhaps essentially just be boiled down to the success or failure of a company, comes down to the product of the magic that your company manages to create and the scale at which it manages to deliver that magic to the rest of the world. And to double click on the components of that equation, I would say that from my lived experience at least, magic seems to be intuition multiplied by the level of execution that you can bring to that piece of intuition. And the beautiful thing and the very, very hard thing as well about multiplication is that if you multiply something with a really low number or 0, you get 0 from the entire thing. So you can bring whatever level of execution into the picture as you want, but if you do not multiply it by some powerful component of intuition, you will end up failing, or at least failing to create magic. And the same, you can be the best operator, best executor in the world, but if you have no intuition, you will end up creating 0 magic as well. Intuition can be a pretty vague term, so I would break it down into something like this. Intuition would be, or in my opinion, is the product of experience and empathy. Experience perhaps being some kind of a combination of your own experience as a product leader or a product manager, but much more importantly, the total sum intuition of the total sum experience of everybody on the product team, but then again, multiplied with the level of empathy that you can bring to the situation. How easy is it for you to put yourself in the shoes of the actual eventual users that will be bringing their consciousness to make that experience and feel that experience of magic. And once again, if you have 0 in either of those, you're going to be in a pretty bad situation. And then to close it up, or to at least close this particular loop, I would say that it is in scale and scaling where, at least from my perspective, the true value and importance of numbers, data, and analytics comes in. But I would also say that if you don't combine the right analytics with the correct systems being in this, in my particular understanding at least, not some particular products or anything like that, but the continuous improvement systems that you build within your organization, your Kaizen process, your Kanban, your Kata, how your people come together to actually bring that data into some kind of an improvement in the process, that is a system. And there is nothing or very few things that are more powerful in this world than the right people with the right systems and with the right information flow, and a very good information flow. And so, to end this up with some actionable takeaways, hopefully, what does this mean for creators, such as the beautiful people that I'm looking at here today? It means this: innovate from your heart, and then scale it with brain. Scale it with your prefrontal cortex, and of course, I don't want to, numbers and analytics, they play a part in the actual innovation part as well, but they mostly tell you when you are failing, and where you are failing, and where in the process people are not connecting with the magic that you are trying to build, but that is also an extremely important part of all of this, because magic is created through some weird combination of iterations, and then also just that beautiful randomness that the world sometimes hurls at you. Secondly, I would advise you to avoid the enemies of magic. Not everything has to have a clear and measurable return on investment story. Never flatten innovation into a single number, and remember to not be lazy and keep bumping the lamp. And finally, simply find the balance. Find the balance between intuition and analytics, between magic and scaling. And be careful to not lean too heavy in either direction, because if you do, you might end up with a very magic-less behemoth that nobody wants, and the world has enough of those. So I encourage you not to build any more magic-less behemoths. Or you could end up with a beautiful piece of magic that only your team and you manage to experience, and that is the saddest thing of them all. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
I still have some now. Could you turn on his very static electricity heavy mic?
Yeah.
Can you hear us both? Raise your hands if you can hear us both. Testing, testing.
Testing.
Nice.
Beautiful.
It's working. Herðu, thank you so much, Kjartan,
Thank you.
for this really inspirational talk. I personally think this was the perfect kickoff for this event. Because, and we were sort of thinking about like what should the order of these talks be. Yeah, wow, crazy.
I have to be like this.
Very zen, very zen. And I think this was really the perfect kickoff because it talked about the purpose of why we do analytics, really.
Start with why.
Yeah, ultimately what we're trying to do, if you hold your hand like this, and then you put your leg like this, and then it should be good. Is there anything we can do about this?
I think it's just the way that this was put on me, I think. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Very exciting. Maybe Kristen's will be better. We'll see soon.
Hopefully.
But what I wanted to highlight is like this is such an interesting conversation about like the balance between analytics and qualitative data and then intuition. Yeah. I feel like you have really highlighted that the ultimate goal is to create a magical experience for the end user.
Exactly.
And from my perspective, one of the best tools, and I think that is also a really important takeaway from your talk, is data.
Yeah.
But it is only one of the tools in your toolbox. And for example, at QuizUp we had like an incredible CEO who had like really, really, really strong intuition, but no desire to use data. Made my job really easy. But I learned so much from him, and it sounds like Noona is blessed with a CEO that has both, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I am
You're
not the CEO, but,
yes.
yeah, but we have a powerful team of people that are balanced.
Yeah, exactly. I have questions, but want to see if there is anyone that is asking any questions, and maybe the Dream Avo team can check if there are any online questions. If you can't remember that thing that you were thinking about during the talk, because that happens to me all the time. I was like, oh yeah, I have to ask about this, I have to comment on this. And you can't remember that right now, you'll also get an opportunity to ask Kjartan about that in our Q&A session with all the speakers at the end. But try to remember to write down your questions. Maybe bump them into the Slack while we wait. My question is, how did you decide on now I'm forgetting what it's called, your product development process. What's it called?
The magic framework.
The magic framework.
Yeah.
Where's the inspiration from it? I assume you took a bunch of methodologies and sort of combined it into one.
Absolutely. So I'm not. Is this on still? Yeah, you can just
Great.
pass the mic. Yeah. Yeah. So absolutely, that's like just a stew, a smoking hot stew of tactics and strategies that the entire team has learned through many years of repeated failures and hard lessons. And of course, it's a living document that we are constantly trying to add to and improve. Not that much with, with data more and more, because we have for a long time at Noona been tracking behavioral and user data inside of our applications. But what has had even more of an impact recently, which we are experimenting more and more with since we got our first full-time data person on the team, is the the data behind the actual development and the processes of all of the teams. So, how effective the product team is, our lead times, our cycle times, and we use Linear for that, and it's piping it into Google Sheets, and we're bringing that into a data warehouse and puking out some really interesting reports that have actually really influenced how we approach product development, and we're doing that across all of our teams. And so, that is where, when I think about, that has been the most recent data success, like in our company in the past months. So that's been, and that feeds directly then into the Magic Framework, because we make decisions about the process, and then we try them out, we experiment with them. Are they working, are they not? And if they end up working, they go into the framework.
Thank you for sharing.
Wait, what did you say?
I said thank you for sharing, and then I thought it was funny if it would just like pass the mic on to you to say you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you. My follow-up question on that. Do we have questions here? Yeah, Hilmar. I will repeat this question in a minute. The question from Hilmar is, there is a lot of effort that goes into detecting magic moments, and his experience, he currently works at Spotify, is that, and he was also with us on the QuizUp team very early, is that there's a lot of data that has to go into finding out where these magic moments are, and potentially I think a part of your question is like, how do you leverage data to then maybe potentially trigger future magic moments? Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and of course, the story that immediately comes to mind is, that 7 friends story at Facebook. That if you manage to get the person to connect to 7 friends in X many days, I can't remember, then they are really likely to stick around. And so I definitely agree that there is a big piece of magic that can be where data really helps you to find out those trigger points that turn people from being like, okay, this is interesting, into being avid fans that really like speak about the product and initiate word of mouth. And yeah, we are trying to, we are still a relatively small team. As I said, quite recently only hired our first full-time data person. But we have spotted some of those moments, and we are trying to find more of them. But I would also say that some of them happen so far outside of the actual software or the app that it's just not possible to measure it or get any quantitative data on it, and that's where your intuition and your empathy and your level of curiousness essentially comes into play, I would say. But yeah, we would like to do that more, and we have had some success with that as well. Does that answer the question? Cool.
Nice, thank you, Hilmar. We had a question from there. Can I get your name? Yeah, Josephine. Because in light of time, I'm going to suggest that you remember your question and save it for the Q&A session in the end. I want to do a quick comment on the Facebook thing. Causation versus correlation. I see some nods. I'm sure people at home are also nodding to this. This is such an interesting, but it's really important to find those aha moments and then figure out whether they are actually correlation or causation, and how can you potentially impact what leads up to it. So this is actually a really good segue into the next talk, detecting aha moments, shortening time to insights. Final words?
Thank you.
Famous 2 last final words. And over to Kristen at Grid. Do you want to test your static?
Yes. Hi. No, that's good. That's great.
It's working?
Yeah.
Nice.
Any static?
I will leave this here as backup.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Perfect. Thank you.
I forgot one thing. Let's give it up for Kristen! Woo, 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 woo! After this talk, we will do a quick bathroom break and then continue.
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Kristen Martel. I'm half French, half British. Been living in Iceland now for 10 years. Currently I work at Grid, which I'm sure some of you have heard about. The best way to summarize what Grid does right now so what we're going for is nothing less than building a new spreadsheet engine, a new spreadsheet tool. So another generation of Excel or Google Sheets. Yeah, actually, Kjartan, I was in London this weekend, and there was one extra layer of magic walking into the tube, was just using the watch, and it just beeped in, and it was an amazing, true moment. Yeah, so today I wanted to talk about a model that we came up with at Grid that is proving very useful in shortening the time to finding insights. And we talked about the aha moments. So it's been both aha moments that we think the customers, our users, are experiencing, but also, of course, aha moments just for us. That's how they're using the product, or this is how it works. And so it's the aha moments, theirs and ours. And of course I wanted to thank Avo for having me talk today. It's an honor. Thank you. Okay, so some magic. All right. Did you use all the magic up? Don't know, help? Yeah, okay, yeah, we're back, okay. So yeah, these days there is a lot of tracking. Behind that, of course, is big data, blah, blah, blah. You know, you've seen this in many presentations. I nearly didn't put it in there, but let's do it one more time. Yeah, you've got Moore's Law, you've got the cloud, all these great enablements. And then, of course, on the back of that, some pretty cool tools have been created. You know, CDPs like Segment, product analytics tools like Amplitude, event tracking plan builders and software like Avo, of course. Yeah, so we've been spoiled. And then there's this cultural movement as well. I mean, it is expected now that you track. It's just expected. It's not the magic moment, if you like, has gone. You know, I've got data for that. Of course, you've got data for that. And there's a lot of, because you can, you know, why stop? It's so easy these days just to put some tracking in there. And it's actually baked in to the development cycle. You know, when I earlier on in my career, I had to fight to get data and to get hooks put into the product. These days, I don't have to do anything. It's just, you know, when a feature is released, it is normal that tracking has been thought about, and it gets released in. Yes, yeah. So yeah, a lot of tracking, and then of course these two forces combine and create this virtual circle. So there's going to be even more of it. The cultural influences the technical, and the technical the cultural. So with this, we get an amazing amount of details. We get great details. Basically, we've gone to ultra HD. We can track, every click, and with every click, we can get all this context around that click as well. So we've seen this is allowed for the rise of product analytics. You can literally just go crazy with these product analytics tools. Every step, just going from here to here, is a funnel. You can analyze it like a funnel, and you can split out all the properties you want. A/B testing as well. It's probably gone a little bit too crazy, I've been in quite a few meetings where, the answer is just A/B test it, and it becomes a little bit of a joke. Maybe we do say that a little bit too often, but again, it's because you can. So a grid, just an example, we've got 130 events, 200 properties, and that's only 3.5 years in, and we're just at the beginning here. So with these great details, that there is some, I wouldn't say concern, but there are some risks. So, and I'm sure some of these you've come up across in your day-to-day as an analyst or a data scientist. There's of course analysis paralysis. You've got all this data in front of you. Where do I start? The CEO or your manager just wants to know. It's just got one question. It's simple. It's just one question, and yet you've got all these potential areas to look at. And then, of course, you can spread yourself out too thin. You've got all these events, these 130 events, these 200 properties. You feel like you have to give all of them a little bit of care. Oh yeah, I've heard you, little event over there, and you as well. And oh yeah, I designed you last week. I need to give you a little bit of love. So you spread yourself out across all these events. And then, of course, if you stay at that level, there is a risk of just focusing on a feature, but a feature just on its own. You're not seeing this bigger picture. So you just have a very isolate, just feature, but you're not seeing what's connecting them. It's basically a reductionism view. You think that the answer is, the deeper you go, I've got an event for this, and I've got many properties, I'm going to go very deep, that the answer is right at the bottom. So when you these risks, they come at the expense of missing out on seeing the bigger picture. So I don't know if you've heard of something called emergence. So we often talk about that, the sum of all parts. Out of the sum of all parts is more than just. There is more than the sum of all parts, and there is some. We put feature 1 together with feature 2, with feature 3, with feature 4, and you could look at all the analytics on their own, but there might be something else that emerges out of it. The combination of those 4 features. So, for example, if you look at the universe, there is an equation that from theoretical physics called the Standard Model, and it goes down to quarks, and we can explain all the forces and how the universe works, basically. But in there's not life. Does not exist. Life emerges from that level of granularity, and of course, so you can look at the detail, but you won't see life. And if you're an analyst for the universe and you missed out on life, I think you wouldn't be a very good analyst. And then so if you over-focus on the features, then you got less time maybe on this last point here, where you obsess about the customers. That is really where the obsession should be, is at the customer and the user level. So what have we got? So I've been setting up to promote this higher level of analytics at the customer level. So what have we got right now? So we've got this life cycle framework. What are my active users? Monthly active users, daily active users, MAU, DAU, and then active, and then they're churned. And then we might have something called retention analysis, which again is the same. You know, are they still active or are they churned? And well, it's a little binary, isn't it? It's kind of you're a 1 or a 0. I find it a little bit limiting. I mean, it's useful, but it's too high level, if you like. We've got segmentation. So we got simple segmentations like an RFM model. So that's where you would look at the recency and the frequency and the monetary value of a transaction and group your customers like that. It's used a lot in retail. These are just examples. And then maybe in advanced analytics, you might use k-means to look at how the clusters and group behavior like that. I mean, these are great tools, but again, these ones are too complex and to run on a short term and super recent basis. I mean, you might be able to run a k-means analysis once a month, maybe twice a month, but it's not. You can't see what happened yesterday in there. So there's a little bit of a lack of recency and reactivity in that analysis. Yeah. So what we've done at Grid, so we came up with a solution, which is to score the behavior over multiple dimensions. But the last bit is super important, the over time. And you'll see later on what I mean by that. So I'll just try and explain briefly what we did in 4 steps. So we had identified key behaviors, and these are our dimensions. And what you want is something like 2 to 5 dimensions. And so to represent how your product is used as a whole. So if you take maybe a social media company, if you look at their users, you've got content creators, then you've got the people that create the content, then you've got the people that consume the content, and then you might have a third behavior on there, which is sharing. So if I was a social media platform, these would be my 3, there might be a fourth, 3 dimensions there. So creating the content, consuming the content, and then sharing the content. And then under these dimensions, you would then build them up with your events. You know, the 130 events that I talked about before. So you wouldn't use all of them. Again, you would select some maybe 2 to 10 events per dimension. So I'll give you an example here. I've got 3 events there: create new content, update existing content, and then maybe add some elements to this content. So these events would just fold into that first one there, content creation. And then you would add some weight to each of these events. So maybe you create new content. You're creating a new unit of content. Maybe that's worth 3 points, and you just do an update to it. Maybe that's just 1 point. So what we found is that it's good to not have the gap between these weights, not too big. Basically, you want to understand. I mean, the first thing to understand is that everything is a click at the end of the day. I mean, the effort is just to lift your your finger. So, you know, assigning a massive weight to one event. But of course, there is intent in there. You know, oh, I'm starting a new project. Maybe that is something big, and now I'm just updating it. But you want to be able to, when you finally see these scores, you want to be able to be able to trace back a little bit what could have happened and how much time and how much effort they've put into this. And then also, you know, there can be some high frequency events like updating a document. I mean, you know, if it's a SaaS, you know, there's no button save anymore. It's just constantly updated. So you might have, you know, if you're online for an hour or 2 with a tool, you might be updating the current version 500 times. So, but the key there would be that you've updated it once in that day. So there you could go, you could limit it. Okay, if they updated in that day, okay, just 1 point. And there's no difference between the 500 and just doing it once. And then finally, you build a model. So you'll need well, I recommend a data warehouse to do this. And you're going to build out a big fact table. And so you're going to do a lot of unions between all the events that you select there in step 2. Put them all together. And the key there, of course, is to add, you need to be able to aggregate over the time period. So you definitely want days in there. Could be week, but you want to be able to have so the day, the name of the event, and of course the user, and maybe the ID of the content. We're talking maybe 10, 15 columns max. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is just jump to some of the output, how we've been using this tool, so you can see what we do. So these are the 3 dimensions that we've identified at Grid. So you either build, or you're engaged with the content, or if you're a builder, then you actually receive views. So basically, there's 2 types of users here. You've got the builder who will then receive views, and then you've got the other type who's just going to engage with the content, but maybe not build. And in that engaging there's viewing documents. So people build documents in Grid, and they have conversations on Grid. So in engage, they're viewing and having conversations. And so this is one team here. Just one team. So the first thing I'd like to point out is that all of a sudden you can see there's a lot of information that just pops out. You can see, okay, this team started in May 21, and we can see that they're still active. Okay, so without even having to do churn, new, lapsed, all that life cycle stuff, I can just see it in one go there. And then I can start understanding what the beginning of the journey looks like. I can see here at the beginning, okay, so it started with a lot of building. And then there was some receiving views, but it's not receiving views from some users. So they might have just shared it in an unlisted way. And then comes July, there's a lot more building. Still hasn't convinced maybe the company that they're going to use Grid. And then comes this period here. Okay, it looks like they're deciding. Of course, I don't know these answers, but at least I can put forward some hypotheses. Okay, they've decided, making some final changes to the document, and then we get all the viewers now that come in, and they start consuming this content. And then you can see afterwards that, so we're learning lessons here. Okay, they create one document, and then they don't change the document. Maybe they've just got one document, and afterwards, look, they go for that long stretch there. They're not making an edit to the document. They're not changing it. They're just happy with the content the way it is, and they consume it with the same intensity. It's the same kind of, it's the same people, roughly, looking at the document every week, because you can see that this is the score, aggregated. Might have dropped down a little bit in November. And then also there, back in January, you can see, okay, yeah, it's a new year, we need to update the document. Oh yeah, okay, let's do a little bit of building here. Sorry for people online, I'm pointing, I'm being very analog. Come to Iceland. I could use that, yeah, here, yeah, so they're building again. So I'm just going to jump over quickly to another team. So that was one way a team uses it. Here is a team that's straight away, okay, so a bit of building right at the beginning, but it seems like there's people engaging with it straight away. And there, again, you can see the basics. They started here, and they're still active. They're still with us. But they use Grid in a different way. They're making edits every week. And that was mainly what I wanted to point out there, that it was a different kind of way of using the tool there. And then here's a final example of collaboration in visualizing collaboration in Grid. And it's also, again, for the life cycle, you can see, look, somebody tried out there, but wasn't that impressed, just probably did a few clicks here and there, and then waited a long time, and then got pretty intense. You can see there the score. So I think, these guys put a 25 in. Okay, over time, there's probably more. There they went straight in with a 200. And there you can see that they haven't really shared. They spent a lot of time building that document, and then all of a sudden, again, a bit like the other one, no more building and a lot of receiving views. And there we saw, so what's going on? So normally it should be equal. If you're receiving a view, that means somebody's engaging. And there we understood another key thing about Grid is that people share documents where the end viewer doesn't have to be authenticated. We realized, okay, that's a popular way for teams to share data. You don't have to be always authenticated. So we learned some stuff here. And then if you drill down here, so here's just how we look at one team again. Oh, sorry, I just wanted to point out as well on those other views, our CSM team, they love that. They jump on a call with a customer. Obviously, they won't tell them that we've got this chart and all that, but they know where they're coming from. They know how long they are, if they've still been active. So the CSM team used them quite a lot. So here is just one team, and there you can see that we've got just one builder, and then we've got three people that engage. So again, it allowed us to understand pretty quickly how these teams are collaborating with Grid. Okay, so there's just one builder. I mean, at the beginning, we literally thought that everybody was going to build documents, and then our activation rate was built around that. We had an activation rate that would just kind of, did you manage to build a document? And then it wasn't looking great, but no, there are a lot of people that won't activate. They're just here to view. Do we need to create an activation event just for those viewers? Maybe. And here's another team there. Well then, that one, you can see there is just builders, and there's no collaboration at all. They're literally just, I don't know, they're trying out Grid and not really collaborating. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but basically we've also got this monster view where you can see every user, and you can start combining all these scores, and what I mainly wanted to point out here is that the engagers aren't necessarily the biggest builders. You can see there. And of course you can add up the score, and then you can see when was the last time they built, when was the last time they engaged. You see here we've got one. He engaged a day ago, but never built anything and never received a view. Anyway, and I think this is my final example here. So this is those other views. They weren't very aggregated. Here is aggregated over the whole of Grid, and you can see the average build score per user in their first 7 days. So this is quite useful when we release a new feature. So I've got some work to do here. So we've just released something, and you can see that over the first 7 days, people are building less, or they're interacting. I guess they are building less. And I think once you map this out to when we've released the features, you can understand a little bit more what's going on. So just a summary of the benefits of using this scoring model. So the first one is obviously aggregations. So you can aggregate across teams. You can aggregate these scores across cohorts, before, after a release, this week versus last. You can see how these average scores. You can do min, max. I mean, all the aggregations available. And then we found it quite useful as a language just between us, even with CSM or CRM. We find ourselves just writing in Slack, give me the users where engaged score is 0, build just 10 over the last 30 days, and over the lifetime they've scored over 1,000. There, done. And also, because it's a continuous scale, you also get quite a lot of flexibility. You can do, instead of just putting users in a box, well, in the end you do put them in a box, but you can say, I want somebody with a build score. I want the build score to be more than 65% of their total score. Okay, that's a builder. If it's the other way, maybe it's more a viewer. And then of course you can pass on all these fields to CRM. And then finally, we haven't got into here yet. We just kind of put this in place, but I believe it could be a very strong platform, or at least a starting point for advanced analytics. You can do a lot of regressions where you could put that score on the X or the Y axis, and of course, for things like churn prediction. That was it.
Nice. This was super insightful, Kristen. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Lucky grid to have you on board, I have to
Thank
say. There were tons of insights. I've tried to jot down most of my thoughts on the Slack, some of them on the YouTube live feed as well, live chat. So to try to remember that I want to talk about so many of these things as a follow-up. I loved your highlight of the builders versus engagers, which is really related to there's a new book out by Andrew Chen about...
the hard side and the soft side. So the builders, they would be definitely the hard side of the network
marketplace.
effect.
Yeah, exactly. A book
definitely.
called The Cold Start Problem.
Yes. Yeah, really good.
Talks about the hard side and the soft side or easy side of a marketplace, like the major contributors versus the consumers. It's like additionally extra complex also for Noona, because it's you're a hair cutter and then you're a person who gets a haircut, but it's still a similar thing.
Yes.
But there were so many good insights in this, and I loved your highlight also of the stack. I'm sure, like, I would love to interview of your, ask you more about your stack. You talked about getting this through a data warehouse.
Yes.
I think you could probably build also some of these metrics with using the formulas thing in like Mixpanel and Amplitude, if anyone's using that. If you want to hack something together and then... Yeah,
we struggled a little bit with, I think at the user level, no problem, but we struggled a bit when we started to aggregate these into teams, because we don't even have a team entity in our product yet. We're just doing it on email domain. So
group analytics.
It was a little, when you want to introduce another dimension.
Exactly.
In Amplitude, you have to pay more.
Yes.
You can, but you have to pay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
enterprise.
Yeah.
It's an enterprise feature. It's the reason why a lot of people think Amplitude and Mixpanel aren't able to allow you to do account-based analytics, but it's just hidden and very expensive. We have a question from Sigrún Helga, but I want to also say we're going to do a quick, I'm going to time this, like I would say 180-second break. Where everyone in the middle of this section will hop to the bar and sort of grab their beers so they can sit down again. And the people on the end of the section, they will wait and sort of sneak over there while Kristen starts their talk. I see some shocks about this. Is this not a logistically sound plan? Okay, I see. A quick question from Sigrún.
I was so curious.
PCA?
The question is, did you use PCA?
No. It is
the acronym stands for Principal Component Analysis.
No, with method in statistics, we have so many variables.
Yeah.
To find a linear combination, basically just assigning weights to variables, that describes the most of the variation.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah.
Go on, maybe find out that you could skip measuring some of the events, and you can also see how they cluster together.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. That could be, but it could be a very interesting step. Yeah.
Sigrún is highlighting an after party about principal component analysis, which is also related to random forest analysis, I would say, about like detecting what are the biggest impacts on specific things. So thank you so much, Kristen, for this talk. You'll be interviewed in a minute. Okay. Let's give it up for Kristen.
Thank you.
And sneak to the bar, get a drink. We'll start in about 180 seconds. Who starts the timer? Bragi is starting the timer. Nice. You online, head to the restroom, fill your drinks with beer. In the meantime, we'll start the rotating slides.
All right. Yeah, tack. Yeah, tack. Well, thanks again for having me. Yeah.
So if you're still waiting for your beer, that's okay. You'll hear us. But start thinking about ending your current loud conversation that you're having. And exchange emails or something for the future conversations that you want to have. And a quick heat check. I don't think anyone over there can even hear me. So we'll do it in a minute. But we'll start here. A quick heat check. Maybe raise your hands if you are thinking about joining for foods at the AVO office, because we're ordering pizzas. Nice. We have a few people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-ish. And then like those groups of people over there, potentially. Is that sufficient? Yeah? Nice. Sölvi, did you want me to ask me anything like that? Fæ klappar þetta? Nice. We are starting. Kristen is setting up. I'm going to do one just loud one over here. I'm in the audience. Should I crowd surf? Okay. We ready for this?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, online people, for hanging in with us while we have our body breaks. We have a concept of AVO called body break. It's a role of every meeting facilitator to remind ourselves and attendee that we might need a body break. Fill your mouth with water, empty your water from your guts, all that stuff. So with that, I will hand the ball over to Kristen, who is going to be talking about some future visions. Give it up to Kristen!
Thank you. Sound okay? Yep. All right. Yeah, I'm here to talk about graphs. And graphs are everywhere. This is not a graph, but it'll make sense later. Some people see graphs in everything, and I wish I was that kind of a person, you know, like Neo in Matrix, or someone that just sees a thing. Oh yeah, I can like structure this in this way. But still, I believe that at least any system, even complex systems, can be described by graphs, whether it's a family, or a subgraph of my family, or the human genome, right, Sigrun? This is sort of, or the most important one of all, the jury points in the Eurovision Song Contest. So graphs are everywhere, and they are helpful. These are, of course, just mostly graph visualizations that we're looking at here. I don't know if there's a graph database behind it, but graph databases are powerful tools to describe these systems that we, you know, can describe as graphs. I think I need to start. Ah, no, back to this. Okay. To me, the reason that I started looking into graph databases was this: breaking silos. Exploding them. In my current position at Sotheby's, I am way too familiar with like dozens of joins just to get like a simple entity and relationships between entities. And we are fixing that with DBT, or trying to get it better, so I'd love to talk about that later with anyone here. But what if there is a better solution? So I'm gonna take you on this journey, see if you buy it. First of all, what is a graph database? Okay, here's the relational database that we all use, at least. And yeah, I guess we love them. They serve a purpose. Yeah, to see, like in this particular table or structure, the entity is there in the middle, like the fact table, joining a lot of other dim tables to it, and you have the full universe that you need, sort of. I put the key value database there as well. Backend developers love them. Analysts hate them. I tried to analyze data from DynamoDB at WowAir, and yeah, it's horrible. But they serve their purpose. They're fast and yeah, good for lookups, I guess. And then there are graph databases, which I don't know if backend developers hate them, but analysts love them. And what they have is that we have an entity which has relationships built into it. So relationships between entities or objects is just as important or even more important than the object itself. It'll hopefully make more sense as I go along. First off, a few good points about graph databases to finally sell it to you. So the entities are pre-connected. You don't have to do joins on the fly. So the relationship is built into it, as I mentioned, so there are no joins needed, and that's the world I want to live in. And I'm trying to get there. Still not sure if this is where this journey will end. This is, so it's hopefully a success story. We don't know yet. And these relationships can have properties. So you can, as in SQL, you have relationships just with a key and a foreign key, and that's just a straight line with no meaning. In graph databases, these relationships can have properties like, let's say, number of clicks or date of marriage or whatever, and a lot of them. And best of all, the schemas of these databases are really expressive and simple. When you look at a schema of a graph database, you understand what's happening better, in my opinion, than from a SQL schema. And the magic of these databases is that they reveal patterns that SQL maybe can find if you know how to do recursive queries and have the biggest computer in the world, and you could maybe do it, but this is really the magic of graph databases. And a few use cases of this. Fraud detection, it's big there. Knowledge graphs, that's actually the space I'm looking towards for my graphs. It's really good for recommendation engines and even real-time recommendation engines, and supply chain management is big. But yeah, I don't want to spend more time on these because I want to get to my own stuff. But again, so the structure of a graph. I'm sorry if I'm going if it's too basic, but from what I've seen and asked around in Iceland, there are not a lot of graph database experts. So I'll just go at the beginning and the basics. A graph is a pair or a few nodes connected with an edge. If you're a mathematician, you probably use something else like vertices and something, but this is the sort of the basic picture of a graph. And if we dive into this, what is a node? A node is an entity or an object. An edge describes the relationships between them, which can be, in many cases, an action, something like clicked, for example. Person clicked a button or something. And this is where you should be, I've seen this somewhere before. Because if you haven't, you should be reading the AVO documentation a bit better. I left a link in here. Yeah, thank you. And this is exactly the sort of the best practices of how you define an event for an event tracking schema. You have an object and an action, or a noun and a verb, or however you want to call it. And when I saw this, and when I was reading about graphs, it kind of clicked in my mind. I said, "Wait a minute! There's one-to-one relationship here. There must be a good use case for event tracking within graphs." So I went along and did some demos, examples, and I want to demo one of these examples here. So first off, just a basic graph database, just to show you how it sort of looks and works. Okay, the resolution isn't great, but let's hope it loads. This is a tool called Neo4j, which is, I think, one of the most used graph databases in the industry. And this is an example database here called Hollywood, from where comes the name of my talk. This is my starting point of graphs. Graphs was from Hollywood. And we can click here just to get like a sort of limit view of these. This is probably top 25 nodes, and all the relationship connecting these nodes. And because this is Hollywood, I want to zoom in so you can all see these nice, good movies here and the actors. Here, the movie is an entity, the relationship is acted in, and the next entity is an actor, or person, like they call it. Okay, this is just an overview of the graph that's in here. What can we do with it? Let's do one thing. Let's check out the full graph, just because it's cool. Just skip the limit. Oh, and this is one of the best parts is this query language. This is a query language called Cypher. They're actually there's not really a standard query language like in SQL. There are a few floating around, but I really like this one. This one should give me all the. So okay, this isn't like the full Hollywood, but it's like 40 movies or something, and the actors, and how they kind of connect through these movies. I think I have one here, which okay. Well, yeah, Tom Hanks is in here, and I don't know, Americans love him. I love him. It's okay. So the study question was, okay, how can we introduce Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks? Who could we use to introduce him? The Cypher query for that is this almost a one-liner, and let's see how it looks. All right, so we got a graph connecting these two, and it turns out that there are a few movies that connect them. Meg Ryan here, she has the strongest connection with 3 movies, and then Top Gun, whatever. I don't want to spend too much time on this. This was just a demo of what a graph database looks like. Oh, I must do one more. The three degrees of Kevin Bacon. Have you heard of it? It's guess so. It's a pop thing. So the theory is that all actors are connected to Kevin Bacon. Are at most 3 degrees from Kevin Bacon. As Cypher would say, match a person called Bacon, connected with 1 to 4 hops to any actor in Hollywood. And this returns the relationship, and this was such magic when I saw it first. I mean, it's better when you press the button yourself even. How can we zoom out here? Turns out that 80% of these actors are connected to Kevin Bacon within these 3 degrees. This is fun, but what does it have to do with Sotheby's and event tracking? So we do auctions. So the first thing I wanted to, like a structure, I guess, as a graph, was on basic auction. So here you can see how beautiful these graph schemas are. We have an entity called sale. We have an artwork which is in a sale, and we have an artist that created this artwork, and this artist is a part of an art movement such as Impressionism and Modernism and all those. So that's just the most basic schema I could come up with for an auction, and then adding data to that, it would look something like this. We still have the same notes, but they have properties. They have titles for the, let's say the sale has a title. There are 2 artworks in this small example sale and 2 artists. And this sort of describes our tiny auction world with a tiny auction. But of course, this doesn't give the whole picture of what's happening, because the magical part happens when you add the users. And this is where event tracking kind of fits like a hand in a glove. So, as you can see here, I mean, okay, all event tracking, like we're talking about here, web tracking, app tracking, it's tracking persons. So it's always, the one entity is always a person, does something to something. For example, there's an event here, person completed, well, no, order completed, right. And order started. You know, we skip out the person part because it's a given. It's a person that does this. Follows a user. And even we can add the UTM campaign as a separate entity, track the initial UTM and the newest UTM. Okay, and this is sort of this schema with a few example data points. But I went ahead and put this into Neo4j. I'm ready for another demo. Okay, so. First, are there any live questions? Do you want to like ask about this? Yeah?
What's a UTM?
It's an urgent tracking. It's a marketing term for like a URL parameter. The UTM underscore source, which is always in the Google. Wait, I'm out. Hilmar.
Is it always like trivial to like figure out these things because like going through like point to point, like is it like always easy to like find the shortest path?
Right. So, is it always trivial to find these the patterns or the schema? Which one are you?
Just like these like relations, like
Yeah.
Like is it for sure known that context is like?
It is not, and that's the hard part of creating a graph database is figuring out like what's a relationship and what's an entity. For example, an order here could also be a relationship, like person ordered an artwork or something like that. But in this case, for example, in most cases, you see you want more properties on the order. You want to be able to track the orders between people. You know, the nodes have a bit more flexibility than the relationships. So, yeah. Not really. I think I haven't run into problems with too many properties. So the question is, do I optimize for number of properties on the nodes or relationships? But it's more like, I guess it's in some parts it comes down to magic, as Kjartan knows, and it's more like, do you feel the relationship is so vital in your model that it's better to have an entity? It's more like that, like the order in this case. Yeah. Noona. Yes, nodes and edges are first-class citizens. So the relationships, the edges, are first-class citizens, and they can be queried just almost the same as edges, as far as as nodes, as far as I know. But it's the difference comes in when you make a query, you have to anchor it to some point, like with a Tom Hanks to Tom. I don't remember who. Tom Cruise. You have to anchor it to Tom Hanks and go out and search from him. You can't. I think you can't anchor it to a relationship. That's kind of the difference. Should I go on? Yep. I'm going on. All right. So I have a an empty database here. So I was told to pray to the demigods, and I did. These are just the, so let's close the old ones. So now I'm in the Sotheby's database, which is empty. First of all, I'm gonna create this, well, basically the same data as I showed you in the last slide, just in Cypher language. The beauty of Cypher is that it's almost like ASCII art. So this is a note, like in ASCII art. This is a relationship. So and the arrow shows the connection, and the curly brackets show the properties. All right, so let's run this to create our basic world. Okay, let's see how it looks. Graph limit 20. All right, this is our world. Am I okay with time? Yeah, approaching end. Oh man. Okay. All right. This is just the auction. Let's add two random people here. Where are they? Let's play it. Come on. I added the auction again. Okay. I'm gonna delete the DB and run it again. So the universe and the people. How does that look? Okay, we have two people here, Steph and Sölvi, connected through the same initial UTM. All right, now you have to imagine like the next steps are events coming in, and I'm grabbing these, but not pressing the play button here. All right, so they know each other, they follow each other. This is what that connection looks like. Steph goes ahead on a spending spree and orders something at Sotheby's. Self-portrait made by Andy Warhol. Sölvi gets really jealous and unfollows Stefania. Yeah, I know. Okay, and he goes himself and goes looking into some expensive art movement called Cubism. All right, how do we look now? All right, so this is our universe. Two people here. Sölvi has only viewed one page, while Stephanie has bought this expensive paintwork. There are actually two artists here connected through this sale. This is really hard to read, but this is the sale, and these are Picasso and Andy Warhol. All right, cool. So this is sort of a totally new paradigm of looking at a user journey. This particular graph doesn't have any time component in it. It's possible in graph databases to use time components. I haven't really mastered it, so currently I'm just looking at the journey as a whole. But okay, well, the real magic of graphs are, of course, these. Well, the math, the graph math. You know, you can find shortest path really easily without doing joints and stuff. So this is the shortest path between Stefania and Pablo Picasso. Actually goes through Sölvi, surprisingly, because he viewed his page. And this is just a tiny example of a database. So I wanted to join the other database that I looked at, the Hollywood one. So I'm creating all these actors and movies, joining it to our auction universe. And we have something crazy here. So we have our auction at the side there, and we have some movies. And now I want to test the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So actors are connected to Kevin Bacon by 3 degrees, but the regular, us normal people, we are connected with 6 degrees. So the story tells us. So I want to see how Stefania over here in the auction graph is connected to Kevin Bacon. And let's check out this query. This is like a one-liner for this crazy answer. Like Stefania is here, Kevin Bacon is here. I like define them and then find shortest path. It's like a built-in function. So
I feel like this will determine my work in the world.
Okay, let's make it more exciting then. Let's check, like, I don't know, 5 steps. 5 hops away, do you find them, Cyber? No connection with 5 steps. Aw. How about just like any connection? Like do all hops you need, just find the connection, please. And here it is. Okay, here is Stefania buying her expensive Andy Warhol picture. Andy Warhol directed a short movie, which Gus Van Sant also directed with him. He, you know, I don't have time to go through this, but Jack Nicklaus is here, Few Good Men, and there's Kevin Bacon. All right, so there is hope. This is sort of a toy example, of course, of what you can do with graph databases, but it is quite magical, and I'm continuing on my journey, and I hope some of you will look into this. And Neo4j is awesome with documentation and examples, so go check it out and create a sandbox. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you so much, Kristen. I hope this was an inspiration to everyone. I am also really excited about part 2, where we talk about like how you actually map this between like product analytics and how you use those tools together. So hopefully we'll get a chance to touch on that.
I think it'll include Kafka, so you will love it.
Exciting. Nice. But with that, I think we'll thank Kristen for this incredible talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will take off my facilitator hat and then put on my staff hat. Wait, I have to have my facilitator hat on first. Welcome to the stage, Stefania Bjarni Ólafsdóttir. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you all here today. So many new faces in the audience. Yeah, so in the interest of time, I'm definitely going to try to run pretty quickly through some of the stuff that I had planned on talking about. And then I encourage you to join our community for follow-up conversations on the stuff that we've talked about today, definitely. Can we see my screen? Yes. And a quick, has the Avo team gotten all of the information about like counts to the Avo HQ and all that stuff? Yes. Pizzas are in the oven. Nice. And the foosball muscles are being warmed up. Very exciting. I've been warming up my wrists all day. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about building data culture, which I think is really sort of fitting for everything that we've been talking about here today. We've talked about intuition versus quantitative data. We have talked about tools and sort of experimental tools, how to leverage those product analytics and quantitative data to actually make decisions, and even on like a qualitative basis, because what Kristen was highlighting was sort of closer maybe even to like a full story of like a session replay tool where you can actually look at individual journeys rather than actually looking at aggregates. And then Kristen was talking about how Grid are leveraging their quantitative data to discover those aha moments. And so I thought it would be perfect to take a step back in the session and sort of like talk about how to get started on building a good data culture and sort of my learnings from building data cultures, both from QuizUp and then consulting various companies and working with these incredible product teams all over the world. And so why is high leverage analytics a cross-functional team sport? Why is that such a fundamental piece in building data culture? Sort of a quick, how I want to get us through that is I want to quickly talk about what led us to Avo, which is our experience in building data cultures. Then I want to talk about sort of what really is the first mile of data. How do you actually get those events in that Kristen has been highlighting and that Chris Björn is, I assume, using in his graph database. And what Kjartan has also highlighted, that they're not only leveraging even event-based analytics for user experience to create and discover those magic moments, but even further sort of operational metrics. But that this part is going to be about those event-based analytics, those product data points. And then where to start with this, and my sort of general recommendation for your first step into a good data culture within a product team. So starting with what led us to Avo, I have now been in data science for around, so during COVID it actually passed a decade, which is huge. I was always counting in years, but now I'm counting in decades, which is weird. I started in genetics first. I was doing sort of data engineering and before it was called data engineering though, distributed computing, correlating physical traits with DNA at Decode Genetics. So I'd been working with huge data sets. And then in 2013, a mobile game called QuizUp blew up and reached 1 million users in their first 5 days. Great context and to what Kjartan was highlighting and the struggle of even getting your first 30 users to play with your app, let alone your first 1 million in your first 5 days. And those were just numbers that were sort of abstract and sort of, I didn't even compute it. And it didn't feel like people to me even. And so they were looking for someone that had worked with huge data sets in Iceland to join the team and figure out why some of those people were coming back again and again and again, playing games again and again and again, meeting people, getting married, and then some people even didn't finish their first game. And so I joined into sort of a data mayhem because incredibly this was sort of, so I joined to do product analytics, and again that was before it was even called product analytics. That wasn't, it was still sort of called web analytics or something like that. Not a lot to Google around retention or things like that. When you Google churn, you would find something about like maybe like a phone company churn or something, which is completely different from like SaaS products or like software products, where it isn't as definite whether people have stopped using your product as when they just switch phone companies. So that was sort of the situation we were in, but we were still sort of, it was a front-running team, but because we had like a really powerful board of directors at QuizUp. Being that small, tiny team from Iceland, we had very impactful investors like Sequoia and Tencent, and on our board was the creator of YouTube. And he asked the CFO to look at metrics like retention. And everyone was like, okay, cool, yeah, what does that mean? But in that light, the team behind the game had already implemented a bunch of analytics events like these. And then the CFO asked me to compute the retention. And first of all, I was like, what is retention? And how do you define it? And second of all, I was like, okay, give me 5 weeks and I'll create these monster join queries to try to synthesize all of these different versions of the same user action. Game started, start game, play button pressed, game started, started game. This is sort of the general problem of product analytics. It's I often like to use an example from Spotify. If we think about like adding a song to a playlist, it's a thing that to us, the end user, the magic is that we can add a song to a playlist wherever we are in the app. It's just always visible to us. From any screen that we open up, we can add a song to a playlist. But behind that user action of adding a song to a playlist, there are like maybe, I don't know, maybe Hilmar can tell us like 86 code paths or hundreds or something, because we have like all those different screens. The full screen song is in play mode screen, like the artist view, all of those different screens you can add a song to the playlist from. And then you have all of these different platforms. You have like iOS, Android, web. You have like Apple TV. You have like all of these different versions of the code base, and all of them allow you to add a song to a playlist. And behind all of those code paths, there are tens of developers. And they might be working together on a day-to-day basis, or they might be sitting in completely different places. And when they decide that they want to measure the success of a release and understand retention, they will look at their product And they don't necessarily know what everyone else in the company is sort of tracking for that same purpose, but at a completely different location in the app. And so this is the jungle that you end up with. And this is the current situation of most of Avo's customers today. Or sort of, no, not today, when they start using Avo, and then we fix that. And so my job was to sort of get buy-in from people like Hilmar and Jói, my husband, who was just here, but had to run for dinner, maybe because he didn't want to face that I was going to shame this. No, I'm kidding. Sort of, how do we actually make sure this works? How do we make sure that when we release a product, and Steini, our CEO, asks, how did it go? My answer doesn't have to be, sorry, give me 6 weeks, and I will try to compute something and write these monster SQL queries to try to make a decision. How can we instead build a culture where even just like an iOS developer that isn't really involved in everything else in the company, or the product manager can just make that decision and look at the data themselves? And so we started a journey of like figuring out sort of what really was the sort of source for this problem. And I will go a little bit into that in the what is the first mile of data and how we sort of attacked that. But we ended up building internal tools to manage data quality from this perspective, prevent this from happening, and sort of synthesize it and make sure there was just like a one version of that user action of starting a game. But first and foremost, increase our team's efficiency and developer efficiency in making sure that it wouldn't take a lot of overhead to sort of synchronize between all of those like tens of developers that would have to implement this across all of these different code paths. And so we optimized for those two things. And then fast forward a couple of years later, I started a company with a couple of friends from QuizUp, and we had the exact same problem again, except this time we didn't have all of the tools that we had built internally to fix it. And that was like a huge frustration moment for me, and I'll just share that story. So we created a company called Viska. It was a gamified microlearning app for employees. And we were sort of reconfiguring the sign-up funnel, the onboarding funnel, and we discovered that 98% of the users were using the email method to sign up. And so we used the opportunity to refactor our sign-up funnel and just drop the phone number. Like those 2% can use the email, and we don't have to maintain two things. Turns out that when we shipped that, we saw like a major plummet in our sign-up conversion, specifically from like 81% to 46%. And we were like, what the hell? What did we do? Weren't there only 2% of users that were actually using phone number? What happened? And then we looked at the data again, and we had a user property, or an event property on the sign-up event called auth method. And it turned out that it wasn't actually 98% and 2%. Instead, we had two versions of the phone number field, which is phone number, 1% of the total, and phone number, without the B, which was 52%. And so that sort of explained that. And that was like it was a bummer because an early startup, that costs a lot of time and effort to refactor your onboarding funnel again and fix that mistake. But personally, for me, it was just like a super frustrating moment and a reason why I sort of didn't want to do data anymore, ever. And that was the beginning of our journey to actually start talking to hundreds of product managers and developers and data professionals in understanding, like, is this really reality? Like, is there no way, better way of doing this? Will we have to build those tools again, which we cannot waste time on doing, which effectively means we have to choose between delivery speed of our product or data quality and the ability to make good decisions. And so that was just like a personal sort of huge frustration for me. And sort of like I saw the future in like flames and was wondering why I'm not a farmer or something instead. And so that was sort of the beginning of going into building Avo, because we learned that basically 99% of those hundreds of people that we talked to were just miserable in their work. be it developers or data scientists or product managers. And then that 1% remaining, they had built internal tools that nobody really loved maintaining, and it wasn't perfect, and it was only customized for that internal thing, and which makes it super difficult to adopt a new data tool, for example, or a development stack, because then you have to make sure that internal product that you built integrates with that and all that stuff. And so that was our starting journey into sort of going into Avo, and like I shared earlier, it gives me great pleasure that we are now saving that time for tons of people in the world, and including Patreon. And on that note of the first mile of data, I love that testimonial from them, where they used to spend 3 to 4 days on every sort of release cycle on planning and implementing and verifying those analytics events, because they had been in this position before, and they had decided we choose data quality over release speed, because we can't make decisions without it. And so they were wasting 3 to 4 days per cycle on sort of that process of sort of mapping out what do we measure, implementing it and verifying it, which is 40% of a cycle. That's 40% of a cycle going into that process. And they got that down to 30 to 60 minutes using Avo, which is sort of like my vitamin into my heart, with of course the addition of like adding reliability to the data. And that's sort of what drives me personally, is sort of helping people build those good data cultures without actually having to sacrifice iteration speed of your releases and being able to make decisions quickly. And so what is that problem? Why is this so difficult? So if we quickly run through, wow, this is really difficult to see. Can you see this? Can you see the arrows? Yeah, I think so. The release process, the typical analytics workflow process looks like this. You sort of, a product manager decides some product changes in like a Figma or a Miro or a Notion or a Google Doc or whatever. Then like an analyst typically joins in and maps out how are we going to measure the release of this thing. And then they ask questions about like, what does success look like? What metrics are we trying to impact? And then they map out those analytics events, like those, game started events and the properties and all that stuff. And they typically do that like on a spreadsheet or an Airtable or a JSON file or something like that. And then they get feedback from the developers that have to implement it eventually. And the developers have to confirm, yes, we can actually log this event at this point in the time in the app. And yes, I actually also have access to this property, so I can attach that to the metadata. And then you get feedback from an iOS developer on that, and they run forward with implementing it. And then 2 weeks later, the Android developer comes in and is like, actually, sorry, we can't do that on Android. And then sort of the iOS developer is like, well, should we refactor iOS, or should we just drop the data and skip it on Android? And then you as a data professional have to make that decision. Are you going to sacrifice it, or are you going to ask the iOS team to actually delay their release? And so there's a lot of back and forth in this process. Typical redesign of the original specs happen in like a Jira ticket or a Slack message. So immediately after this step, the spec for the analytics event is outdated already after this conversation. That happened somewhere else. And then a developer goes ahead and implements this, and they use like typically sort of like generic SDKs, which take in like a string that describe the name of the event. And they type that string in, and you end up with all of this mess, like song added, playlist song added, song added. And this is in all of the different locations in the code base that we were talking about. And then someone goes in and sort of tries to verify that the implementation is according to their spec. And remember, the spec is already outdated. But in any case, they try to do it and try to synthesize things. And they typically find something. And what they have to do then is go back and be like, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but it looks like you implemented this in a different way between iOS and Android. And I must ask you to fix this before the release. And you're sort of in this begging position to ask the development team to delay their release. Maybe the product manager even doesn't agree with you, and they're like, fuck it, let's just release it, and like whatever. But sometimes you end up deciding to sort of prioritize data quality. And if you do, then basically those developers that had already moved on to something else, they have to task switch back to fixing whatever they implemented in their code base and sort of synthesizing it. And this happens like on a few, like these are like a few back and forths. that happen in this case. And typically they don't detect everything, you detect some things. And then you ship. And so hopefully you caught as much as possible during this process, but typically you also detect some issues when you actually start analyzing your data to make decisions on what things you should ship next. So this is like the typical analytics release process. This is the process that we streamlined from 3 to 4 days for Patreon down to 30 to 60 minutes by automating so many of these steps, by creating those single source of truths so that the specs are actually up to date and sort of in sync with the code. I will leave this here, but I don't see this as like a promo for Avo, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. You can go ahead and look up how this works. But basically we streamline every single step of this process so that there is less back and forth, a lot of automation. We have code gen, we have automatic verifications, all that stuff, jazz. And it sort of, it inspired, very inspired by sort of the Git workflow. Having version controls for your analytics specs, being able to ask for reviews on your suggestions, which is very difficult in a spreadsheet. You can leave a comment on a cell, which is not very efficient. And it's sort of designed for having teams at scale with multiple product teams, with multiple platforms working on analytics release changes at any given point in time, just like Git is. But that's on tooling, and that's on the problem. What I've now covered is like tooling and problem. But where should people really start? And from my perspective, this all really boils down to sort of culture and sort of building internal relationships, building sort of partners between the data professional, the product manager, and the developer. And depending on your maturity as an organization, your data culture maturity, is the CEO excited about using data, or is there someone excited about using data? You will have to sort of revert to various different steps. Typically it starts with some sort of internal marketing. Like, what can we do if we actually know the answer to this question? Can we ship an update and see like a major lift in something? So I always recommend like starting really small, but the things that I do want to highlight here is make sure that you become an evangelist for thinking about your data as a product, and like read product management books on how to become a better data professional and how to build a better data culture. It means your product, for example, has stakeholders. It has creators, it has consumers, it has all these different roles. And you need to think about your data from that perspective. And you need to align those stakeholders. And the key stakeholders in your data as a product, specifically for product analytics, are these 3 roles: data professional, product manager, and developer. Those are sort of the 3 key roles that you really want to align and make sure are sort of thinking about this as a team sport and as a part of the product release cycle, which Kristen was highlighting, and it's not to be taken for granted. Most companies have analytics as a major afterthought. Maybe sometimes as an afterthought after you've released your product and the CEO comes to you and is like, hey Steph, how did this release go? And you're like, what release? And that's a bit frustrating, but in some cases it's just the last thing that you do before you ship your product. That's a little bit better, but the best thing is when you manage to make this as a part of your product release cycle. So that's what we did at QuizUp. And here's a blog post talking about what we introduced at QuizUp, which I'll just leave you with and talk not much more about that, which we ended up calling the purpose meeting, which was a sit-down, a stakeholder meeting, where these 3 roles got together super early in the product development cycle. Like before the developers would start implementing even just like the product change, we would start thinking about this. And then we would align on the purpose of the release, the goal, like what are we trying to accomplish with this for the end user? What is the magic moment for the user? How will we measure its success? Are we going to look at the impact of day 1 retention? Are we going to look at the impact of the conversion rate through a specific release, through a specific funnel in the product? Are we going to, like, what are we going to look at impacting? And then what literal event structures do we need in order to be able to visualize that metric? Like, and this always depends on the tools that we're using. Are we using BigQuery? Do we have a lot of flexibility in joining a bunch of events, for example? Are we using Mixpanel or Amplitude? Do we like need the event structures to be like quite fat as we talk about them? Like few events with multiple properties? Or can we have them like multiple events with few properties? Those are all design decisions. And data design is a really important aspect in this, which also I care a lot about. And the best data design comes when you have thought through these things. And the magic of the purpose meeting, and I'm going to refer to Kristen's talk, and I left a comment on this also on Slack. One of my favorites was sometimes the developers at QuizUp would say like, okay, great, we'll release this and then we'll measure its impact on day one retention. And I'd say, okay, great. If day one retention plummets after we release this, are we going to consider this a failure? And they'd say, well, no, because there's seasonality. It could be like released on like a Tuesday, which typically is just like a worse day than all other days. Or like there could be a marketing campaign that, brought a lot of, irrelevant users to our platform and they just have worse day one retention. I think we should A/B test this. Is something that sort of came from the developers, from these purpose meetings. And I made sure to actually eventually try to never ask anyone to A/B test anything, but only just have them decide that they care, that the product team, they care about understanding the real impact of this release. Because there's certainly is more effort in releasing things behind A/B tests than not. You have to maintain like 2 versions of your code base. It slows down the release, and so the product manager might even disagree with releasing this behind an A/B test. But if the team really cares about that this is a thing that really is important to understand the impact of, then that will sort of surface naturally during this process. And so this will feed into that, better data quality, better decisions for understanding the impact of your release. And then my favorite impact of this has always been that we went from something like maybe 1 or 2 developers looking at charts occasionally at QuizUp before we introduced this process, to I would say probably like half or 70% of the developers got very curious about releases when we released them. And that's not a surprise because developers as a group are typically pretty intelligent beings, number one. And then second, they typically care about what they're building. Like they want to have purpose in what they're building. It's only a matter of sort of us as data professionals introducing the value and the impact of making better decisions on what you build using your data. And sort of this turned analytics as away from being like a chore that developers do for someone else in the company, some random data person somewhere that they don't work with on a day-to-day basis, and they hate doing it, into actually being one of the most fundamentally valuable tools to build better products. One of them, with intuition and qualitative data being the other 2. So that is it. I'm actually probably not going to do an AMA because we're quite far over time, but I do appreciate everyone here sticking with us. And it's been really wonderful. I think I would like to ask everyone to join me on the stage just like for a last. So everyone, come on, no. Kjartan, Kristen, and Kristen. If there's anything last minute that you want to talk about, I really recommend that you join us on the community if you have any follow-up questions, because unfortunately we don't have a lot of time for questions. And we'll keep the conversation going there. Mention us on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I think on the Facebook event we shared their social handles as well, so you can reach out to them. Oh yeah, vote for Avo. Yeah, that's really good. Any sort of like a really great question or stupid one? Stupid ones. Yeah, everyone's just desiring pizza. Hilmar.
Like one thing I've seen is that like to kind of statistically significantly answer questions, you require a lot of scale sometimes.
It's a great question. Hilmar's asking to be able to significantly answer questions, or like with statistical significance, you require scale of data. And do we have any advice on doing that with smaller sets of data? My general advice, and then throwing the ball over, my general advice is that data can still be used as indicators, even though they're not, data points aren't, like even if the data isn't statistically significant, it can still be used as indicators to, for example, what you want to then further do with user research, or build bets, even if you don't have statistical significance. I think statistical significance matters when you are at Spotify or Amazon scale, where a 0.1% drop in the conversion rate to becoming a premium user will result in like hundreds of millions of dollars in your annual revenue. But for less scale data, typically the impact of doing bets like that is also less impactful. Any additions to that?
I have some thoughts, right? But regarding A/B tests mostly, I don't know if that's what you're thinking about. Okay, because I worked at Booking.com where we A/B tested everything. Like if you want to bold a word somewhere in like buy now or something, you A/B test it. So there are like hundreds of A/B tests going on. Because their scale, they can do this. And then currently at Sotheby's, the action of bidding is really infrequent. So bidders and auctions is infrequent. So my kind of advice and maybe workaround there is to move further up the funnel instead of placing a bid, or I don't know, in Spotify's, I don't know, becoming a premium member. Go further up the funnel and have the metric being just visiting the bid page or clicking the button, even though you don't follow through. So that'll give a good indication of an A/B test.
I like it. Anything to add?
Yeah, no, we struggle with this a lot, and we were talking about it just this morning. How long is this test going to take? And as soon as you say something like 2 weeks, it seems enormous. We've got to leave. We're stay in this configuration for 2 weeks. So yeah, I think just as Stefania said, qualitative data is just a data point. It's not the whole thing. It is a data point. Yeah, and then intuition, of course. And yeah, you have to bet and use that as well. But it's just part of the picture. Yeah.
A general recommendation also for like those tests that take a while is, for example, so our magic framework, our product development cycle, we call it, we have a garden of pitches, which are things that go from a cycle of, their life cycle. The pitch's life cycle is they're in shaping, so we're shaping what we're going to build next, and we're working cross-functional on that. And then we go into design, and then we go into, and that includes like user interviews and sort of prototyping and getting feedback and things like that. And then we sort of move into build when we've confirmed a few things, and then we move it into learn. And so when we ship things, that's not the final step. That's the first step to learning. I think that's a really important piece in A/B testing, particularly when you sometimes have to wait 2 weeks or months or something to learn something. Yeah. Any other? Yeah, Jakob.
I'm curious as to what everyone's data stack is.
Yes, that's a really great question. What is everyone's data stack?
Yeah.
Asks Jakob from Posttalk.
Segment that goes into Amplitude and Redshift, and then, as I said, Amplitude and Looker. That's on purely on the analytics side. And then we use tools like Full Story as well on the qualitative side. That's it. And yeah, of course, Avo.
First of all, yeah.
Right there at the beginning, yes.
The first mile of data.
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty similar for us. It's Avo segment, then Amplitude and BigQuery, and the data science team lives in the Google GCP world. We do all the machine learning in there with Spark and Beam and stuff that I'm not that good at even. What else? yeah, Neo4j, graph databases.
Yeah, so for us at Noona, it's interesting because we have these two very separate products, the backend system that is a software as a service product, and then the marketplace. And the dynamics of the usage are so different that we actually have to make a couple of decisions there, trade-offs, essentially built around pricing, because we're also a pretty small company still, and as I also mentioned before, the economy is shifting, so we have to think about our burn rate and boring stuff like that. But we use Segment at the heart of it, although we are, because I hate this dynamic of having to make the very hard trade-off of, is the product charging per user or per event? So for example, we use Amplitude for the marketplace because they have 10 million free events or something per month, but I prefer Mixpanel for the backend system, Noona HQ, because they track per user, and that makes a lot of sense for a software as a service product. So it's a really funny situation, but it's Segment, Mixpanel, and Amplitude, and then we got a lot of stuff going into a BigQuery data warehouse that we're then, channeling into Tableau and Data Studio and some tools like that.
Wow.
No Avo as of yet. We're shame on me.
There's one thing
that's a luxury thing for us. We're aiming for that. When we get more cash in the bank, we'll start speaking. What's the freemium plan?
We might be able to hook you up with a startup plan.
I need to actually add one thing to our data layers, because that's the kind of the headache and our pain point, which I'd love to discuss with any of you later over pizza. Our product and our prod databases are running on AWS, Postgres databases, while we're doing the analytics and machine learning in GCP. That's and we need a good, we're doing daily dumps, which feels so 90 something to me. So we need a good solution there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
We at Avo, we love to try to make sure we use most of the tools that our customers use. So we have a pretty diverse stack. But there was a great question from Björsi recently on our community Slack, which is just if you're starting fresh, you don't have to think about think of the stuff that you have in all of your databases today and how difficult it will be to migrate those over and whatever. What would you choose? And so I think that was a really fun question, and it sparked some conversations. I would go for, and I think I'm going to talk in categories and then mention examples in the categories rather than specific tools. I would definitely be using Avo. If I didn't believe in that, I probably wouldn't have started this company. That would be the first step. Then
Sorry, Steph, what would be the category of Avo?
That is a really great question.
Or are you a category maker?
We are a category builder,
Yeah.
and it's been really interesting. And we started this really early when no one was talking about this. 2018. Early adopters of also Mixpanel and Amplitude back in 2013, and that's why we had these problems. I remember when we were doing one of the user interviews during when we were thinking about how are everyone solving this? This can't be this hard. And then we, among other people, talked to Hilmar, who shed a light on the fact with me that Spotify built this type of internal solution in 2016, and we did it in 2014.
Right.
That made me feel a little bit proud,
Yeah.
I have to admit. And so, we started this in 2018, and there's been a lot of market maturity now in the last year, I would say. And I would say the verdict is still out on what to call this category. It is related to data operations, but that also is a way wider area. It's also very focused on event instrumentation. And so I think that is sort of if you look at the heat around that subject area in the last few months, there are a lot of people very frustrated and sort of very frustrated about how bad sort of their environment internally is on that area. From my perspective, what matters to me is sort of helping teams manage the data life cycle of an event, from when you start planning it and put it in context with what you want to measure, to when you have it downstream in like a whatever business tool, and you have to understand like how did it traverse from there, and how does it relate to even like your Stripe data potentially.
Yeah.
So that's also a personal
Do a
passion of mine.
graph.
Yeah.
Could do a bit of graph, couldn't it? Yeah.
But yeah, so I would have a proper taxonomy is another one.
Oh, yeah.
I think actually Kristen has a pitch for the category.
Yeah, I was kind of working internally on kind of telling people about this great tool. Am I in? And I use the word data catalog mostly because the segment tracking plan is a totally different thing than an Avo tracking plan. It's more of a catalog where you go and you look up things, you know, what does it mean, where does it trigger from, and all that. So that worked well for me, for this use case.
The challenge there, to talk about and analyze the analytic space, is that data cataloging is an old term that has also been used with like
did I say data
tools.
catalog? I talk about this event catalog.
Event
it's
catalog.
different. You know, we have to make a
That's
distinction there.
exciting,
So
very
it's
exciting.
event catalog.
Yeah, but that's another subject. But would love everyone's thoughts on that. My feeling is that we're going to be seeing a major rise in this right now, which is very exciting. So, Avo for event planning and instrumentation, some sort of a CDP, which is a fuzzy term, but I would like to define it as a way to stream your data from multiple sources into multiple other sources, and ideally turn on a new destination without updating your code base, so that you can try out new tools with little to no effort. And then a point-and-click product analytics solution, definitely, like post-hoc, amplitude, Mixpanel, huge growth in that as well today. Data warehouse, BigQuery, Snowflake. I would have said Redshift 5 years ago, but they haven't kept up, unfortunately. They were a really good forward-thinking solution, but they've been sort of advanced. And then whatever is relevant for your business use case, which really depends a lot on like whether you're a B2B company or a B2C company and things like that, whether you're going to be using like a HubSpot or an Intercom or whatever, and the cost units matter a lot for that as well. And then I would definitely also add a sort of session replay tool, like a full story, which Postdoc also has, and a few other players in that area, to be able to empower like design and things like that. Nice. Did you want to add something? No. Awesome. I'm convinced that we will have great conversation over food and pizza. Those of you who can't make it there, please continue the conversation with us on our community, or reach out to us via Twitter or LinkedIn. I think we have the contact info here somewhere. Here we are. So this is how you can join our community. That top link, here's where we are on Twitter, and go to the Facebook events to find all of their contact info for these beautiful people. So with that, I think I would like to thank you so much, Kjartan, Kristen, and Kristen, for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate everyone joining us today, both remote and also in person, and particularly us rehearsing, having our first in-person event in a really long time, and relearning managing time based on that, which is a completely different beast. And a comment from Sölvi. If you want to join us for food and pizza, which we would love, we've been warming up our wrists and our stomachs to digest the pizza and our conversation muscles. We're going over to Klapparstígur 29, which is just like 3 minutes walk from here. We'll have two foosball tables. We'll have pizza, we'll have beer, good company, and we can continue diving deeper into all of these areas. You can find that address also on the Facebook event if you lose it. Anything else I'm forgetting? Nice. So, let's give it up for these amazing people here. And thank you everyone so much for joining us.